Hi not board gamers, and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now, back in the very early days of the second decade of the 21st century, the human population were allowed to do this thing which was called going outside. That's right, before lockdown and isolation, humans would go outside and we'd encounter many wonderful things that the world had to offer, be that nature, be that birds and bees, but also one thing that we were encountering on a constant basis were cars and transportation. Now, cars and transportation, they were fantastic. We used them to get from A to B, but we also used them as a means of entertainment, and that forms the basis of today's game. In what these days could feel like a science fiction type scenario, we're going to be looking at giving an in-depth look to Rallyman GT by Holy Grail Games, designed by Jean-Christophe Bouvier. Now, all joking aside, the Rallyman GT is a kind of reboot of an original game that came out in 2009, which was Rallyman, and this was launched on Kickstarter maybe 18 months or so ago, and it started hitting people a little bit earlier this year, but at the same time it went to retail. Now, from my perspective, I have, and I will admit this, absolutely zero interest in cars and car racing, but I, just like, I have zero interest in ornithology, but I enjoy a game of Wingspan. I thought this looked kind of interesting. It's a racing game, and I don't necessarily have a racing game in my collection to date. So I went out there and I bought the base game of Rallyman GT. I've subsequently bought some of the expansions as well, and I decided that this looked like a really interesting and fun game, and certainly the reviews that were coming back, people seem to like it. So what we're going to do today is take an in-depth look at the game of Rallyman GT and look specifically at the solo game within the box here, and what else you can do to embellish that solo game as well, maybe looking at some of the files that are available on BGG. So without much further ado, let's take a look inside what you get with Rallyman GT, how to set the game up, how the mechanics work, and more importantly, is it worth it from a solo perspective? Let's go and have a look. So if you're a full-time petrol head, you're probably eager to tear into your box of Rallyman GT. And when you do absolutely tear into that box, the mechanical wonders inside consist of some cardboard modular tiles. They also consist of a lot of cardboard tokens. They also consist of cards which represent your car itself. And speaking of the cars, you will have a number of small plastic cars to represent the players, and everything is driven by the dice that come with the game, because to simulate a kind of sprawling world mapping and modular system of expanding kind of tracks with increasing difficulty or decreasing difficulty or just various amounts of difficulty, it's going to be done by rolling dice. That's right, Rallyman GT is almost a luck-based dice rolling game. There are some mitigations there, because to progress your cars around the track, you will be rolling dice. Well, what's that I hear you say? That surely such a highly skilled sport as motor racing cannot be replicated and kind of fashioned by using the random luck element of dice. I mean, there's lots of things to consider when you're motor racing. There's how you tune the car, the various aspects of the car that you change. There's the track, the weather conditions, how much fuel you put in for the weight of the car, and when you stop to refuel the car. Surely all that has a massive impact. And no, not really. It kind of touches on some of those things in terms of the game, but the game is going to provide you with a arcade style racing experience rather than a simulation style racing experience, which is great for somebody like me, and I should imagine mass swathes of the populace. Look, I've been driving since I was 17, and I'm 49 now, and I know some basic mechanics of cars, but I'm not interested in the in-depth mechanics of them. So Rallyman GT, for me, is akin to playing, I don't know, maybe Gran Turismo on the kind of full auto settings, as opposed to kind of on the full manual settings where you can alter everything, and that's great because it provides some instant accessibility. So you've opened your Rallyman GT box and you've been kind of inundated with a wealth of cardboard tiles and plastic pieces and cardboard tokens, etc. Now, setting up the game is comparatively easy. It's very easy, but a little bit time consuming because each map is different. Each track that you play is different. What you'll generally do is you're going to get one of the rule books. Now, I do have a couple of the expansions, which you get more tiles in, and you're going to pick a particular track. And then what you will do is you will then build that track according to the picture that's in the rule book. Now, it may sound a little bit daunting working from that picture and trying to identify everything, but it does give you the numbers of what the different map tiles are. And as you can see, each map tile has a little identifier number just there, and that tells you which ones you should be putting on the map to create your map. Now, what I tend to do, rather than use the book, is there is a Rallyman GT app. And if we go into there, and here we go, I think I've got track 7 set up here. As you can see, that track is replicated up here. You press on that and you can have the full overview, which is great. Obviously, it tells you how the track should look, but it also, what you can do there as well, is it tells you each individual tile that you lay out for any particular track, how many of each tile piece that you need, and then you can play the track and record it on this app as well. So that's a particularly good thing. I would highly recommend getting the Rallyman GT app. It makes the game a little bit easier to set up. But as you can see, there are a number of tracks that will come with the various rule books, or you can literally just go crazy and create your own track, and that is how you will set it up. You put the tiles in place, you will put however many cars you're using. Now I've set this up for a 4-player game. Generally, if you're playing with the solo rules out of the box, you're going to be doing time trial mode, so that's just one car, although we will come on to different ways that you can play with 4 cars as well. And as you can see, we have the various cars set out here with their marker tokens, and I'll explain how those work in a bit. But there we go, that's how easy it is to set up Rallyman GT. So, as you can see, it's kind of a breeze to set up, and the only time-consuming bit is finding the right tiles. Having a decent organisation system or organising them in a decent way will certainly help you pull out the right tiles, but you will spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes setting up the particular board, but there's a bit of a nice kind of feeling in building that. There's a rule book, obviously, that comes with the game itself, and the actual rules are some kind of 21, 22 pages long, and the rule book is pretty nicely laid out, to tell you the truth. It's slightly ambiguous on some of the rules, and it did take me a couple of games to actually start playing it correctly, but once you get them down, the rulebook absolutely works. There's some lovely illustrations in there as well. And at the back of the rulebook you have the advanced rules, and then the official solo mode, which is, as I mentioned, is for a time trial as well. So what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about how that time trial works and how you play the game of Rallyman GT from a solo perspective. So, in the solo game, you've chosen your track from the rulebook, and I've set up core track number 7 from the rulebook, and then what you're going to do is you're also going to choose your car. Now, in the base game, you just get access to the GT6. There is an expansion for the GT5 model and also GT4 model, but as you can see, I've chosen a purple GT6 model car there. Also, you're going to choose the weather conditions that you're racing in as well. Now, generally, in the solo time trial mode, you're probably going to start off and continue on the fair weather, but each car comes with a couple of cards for different tyre types and different weather conditions. So here we have, for the GT6, we have the weather conditions and the number of dice that you get for the standard tyre, which is here, or the dry tyre in standard conditions, and then if it was ever to change to rain. And what that tells you is how many dice you get. So there you can see it says 6 black dice, 2 white dice and 2 and 3 red dice, and what they are is they are your dice which will drive the game. So the black dice all have numbers on them, and those are effectively your gear dice, and they will help you go up and down throughout the gears. Then you have the white dice, which are coasting die, and they help you maintain the speed. But of course, if you're going up through gears, to come back down, if you want to come back down heftily and more than one gear at a time, then you're going to need some braking dice as well, and that's what the red dice are. And the dice have got this little hazard symbol on there as well, and we'll come to how that works in a wee while. Of course, you're going to take your one car. I've chosen the purple car, so I'm going to take my car and set it up on the starting space of the grid. So I have my car card, which is just for a bit of visual flavour. I have decided that this is going to be a dry race, and I'm using my dry tyres. It's telling me the dice I've got there. I collected my dice, I put my car on the starting grid, and I've also got here, which are my kind of gear markers, which you flip over each turn to tell you which gear you effectively ended that particular turn in. So that is just a way to track your gears as you go up and down throughout the gears in the game. And that's it. We're more or less ready to begin. I have some of these focus tokens, and I have this little bag of nastiness, which we'll come on to in a wee while. That's if you crash out of the track. That's it. We're ready to race. So as I mentioned, it's a dice-based game, and we're going to use these kind of black, red and white dice to move the car along the track. So from the starting position, what's going to happen is the very first dice you're going to place is going to be a number 1 die. That's your first gear. We're going to increase the gears. 1, 2, 3, 4. You see how I switched lanes there? Suddenly I now have 4 dice laid out on the track, saying I'm in 4th gear as I go here. Then I'm going to go up to 5th gear for this final dice that I'm going to play. Now, I cannot play my final remaining gear die, which is number 6 die, in here, because to be in this particular lane, I have to be at a gear 2, otherwise I am going to incur a penalty. So for the first start of my turn, that's how my dice are going to be mapped out. However, that doesn't mean I just automatically move there in 5th gear. What's going to happen now is I'm now going to roll the dice and see whether I actually incur any hazards, and if I incur too many hazards, my car is going to spin out. And as we roll the dice, there are 2 ways to roll. So now we're going to come to what is essentially the crux of the Rallyman experience, and this is your dice rolls and how you roll these dice, because as I mentioned, there are 2 ways to roll. One of them is comparatively safe and helps you move along the track and is absolutely necessary in certain experiences or in certain parts of the game. The other part is slightly more risky, but will help you progress and gain some focus tokens, which will then help you mitigate future dice rolls. Let me explain how this works. So the safest way is to roll each die individually. So here we go, I have the number 1 die, so that's my first gear die. I'm going to roll that, and there we go, I got a 1. So that is safe, I put that on the track. Then I take the second die, and I roll that for number 2. And there we go, that is safe also. I take my third die, which is number 3 gear. That is also safe. I take my 4th die, which is my 4th gear, and here we go. I've actually rolled a hazard symbol on that. Now, I'm still safe. You need to roll 3 hazard symbols. And here we go for my 5th and final die, my 5th gear. I roll that, and that also is safe at 5. So now, my car can move to where the position of the 5th die was, and I will put my 5th die, my 5th gear marker on there, and show that I have now finished in that particular position in 5th gear. So that's a nice and safe way of rolling it. As you can see, if I would have built up some hazards in the early stages, so if I had built, I don't know, my first roll would have been a hazard, my second roll would have been a hazard, maybe I would have stopped there because I didn't want to risk a 3rd hazard. And that would then allow you to obviously kind of mitigate against hazards. Now, the second way of rolling, which is slightly more risky, is that you roll all of the dice together. So here we go, I'm rolling all 5 dice, and as you can see, first of all, I'm in gear 1, and that's come back as a hazard. There we go. Gear 2, that's come back as a hazard. 3, I'm okay. However, my 4th gear has been a hazard, so I don't even get to where 5th gear was. What's happened here is I've spun off the track where I encountered my 3rd hazard. Unfortunately, that becomes now a spin-off. I've got 3 hazards. I've spun off the track. I did it in 4th gear, and as we can see here, it does say in 4th gear, I'm going to gain a 00 timing token, and I'm going to move my car to the side of the track, and I'm also going to, what's this? It says, if you look here on the side of this particular track here, it's got a little red triangle on it, little red marker on there, and what that means is, if we look back at this, I span off in 4th gear, I've got a 00, and I'm also going to pull 2 hazard tokens out of this little nasty bag of nastiness. Wow. There are now some ways to help you mitigate those rolls and get those focus tokens, and I'll talk about those now. Okay, so that flat out roll didn't really go as planned. I got 3 hazard tokens, but so let's say that didn't happen, and I got, in my flat out roll, I managed to roll kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I rolled everything as it needed to be. Here we go, second roll did that. So 1, 2, 3, I've changed lanes, 4 and 5. So my car would now move to where the 5th die marker is, and I put my little 5th gear marker on there, and that's it. But what I would also get at this point is I would get 5 of these focus tokens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what you do for every black or white die that you roll that's successful, you will get a focus token. What they help you to do, and this is on your singular rolls only, is you will then kind of secure a die on your singular roll. So let's say at previous round I'd actually rolled these 5 and I'd finished there, and then I needed to map out my next goes, and I was going to do singular die rolls, and I know I didn't want to get 3 hazards on this, so I could put a focus token 1, 2, 3 on there, and then I could continue my singular rolls. So there we go, that singular roll for that 1 is a number 1, and the singular roll for a 2 has come back as a 2. These are saved because I've used my focus tokens, so they allow you to secure your singular rolls, and that means I could finish there. What happens then is I then discard those focus tokens. So the focus tokens are really, really useful, and that comes back to the kind of flat out roll. It helps you progress rapidly across around the track, but it also provides you with the option of getting these focus tokens, which you can then use on subsequent single die rolls to secure your dice, and that's how you can mitigate against spinning out. So here we are in solo mode, and we got to the end of our first turn, and this is where, under a time trial in the solo mode, you're going to start making record of stuff. So in the back of the rulebook you will see this. Now you can either photocopy this, or you can print it online, or there is a version which I use every time now, which is on the app itself. And this helps you absolutely mark your time, because what happens is each and every turn in the solo mode, for time trial, obviously you're going to mark the relevant details and track number here, but every time you finish a turn in a particular gear, it will add some time on. So of course, if you can finish a turn in 6th gear, that will only add 10 seconds of time. Obviously, if you finish it in 3rd gear, it's going to add 30 seconds of time. If you finish a turn in 1st gear, it's going to add 50 seconds. If you've got a 0, so you've had a mild spin out, it's going to add a minute. And if a double 0, like I did on that flat out roll, then that would add 2 minutes of time. So every time you take a turn moving around here, you record the time, and you can start to see how this time trial mode will start to work then, because of course, you know, as you get round the lap and you finish a lap, you can then record your entire time, add everything up, find out your entire time that you finished on, and then you can play another round and then see if your time beats that. Now on the app, it works a slightly different way. What happens here on the app is you got it set up for track 7, add lap, and you put whatever gear you finished in. So I finished that in 5th gear, there we go, that's okay. And if I did a flat out roll, I also got 5 focus tokens as well, and there we go, that's done that. Oops, that's 50, that's not right. So we've got 5 focus tokens, there we go, and then I can add another lap, and then you would then add the next turn on there. On the app, it does say lap, it means turns, but that does the same thing. And over the course of the game, of course, it will tot up your scores, keep a record of them, and you will absolutely then be able to assess how your times go on each and every lap. But that's not it. It's not just as simple as using these black dice, because of course we have the white dice, the red dice, and we have what happens when you spin out, and this little bag of nastiness that I keep referring to. So let's have a look what happens with the next turn and how we break and coast in certain moves. So using your coast die is relatively, well, it's very straightforward really. Coasting helps you maintain a particular speed. So if you're in 3rd gear and you want to maintain 3rd gear for a particular stretch, all you're going to do is use one of your white coast die. And as you remember from the GT6, in this particular whether we have, and with these tyres we have 2 coast dies. However, each coast die does also have a hazard symbol on there as well, so they can increase the chances of rolling hazards, and which is obviously for a flat out roll has more impact for you there. But for each white die, coast die that you use along with your black die, you will get a focus token if you do a flat out roll. However, that changes with the braking dice, so the red dice that you use for braking. Now you get 3 of those in this particular GT6 and these weather conditions with this tyre, and of course they have some of these hazard tokens on there as well. And you use brake die to move down more than 1 gear, so you can move up and down gears in steps of 1 naturally by using the die. So maybe you start off in 3rd gear, you go to 4th gear, and you go to 5th gear, and that's fine, you just progress your dice that way. Or you start off in 4th gear and you go down to 3rd gear and 2nd gear and you use your dice that way, and that's fine. However, there are occasions when you need to move more or break down more than 1 gear stop at a time. If you remember on that last corner that we got to 5th gear, and then I had to be down in 2nd gear as we went around the corner. That meant I would have had to play 2 brake dies. Okay, so I'm in 5th gear, brake to 4th, brake to 3rd, then I'm in 2nd, and that would have been 2 dice. And these do not add to your focus token rolls, so you're going to have to use your brake die to get down more than 1 gear stop at a time, and that's how you'll go throughout the game. You're going to absolutely try and plan out and maximize those dice positions using your brake, using your focus, using your gear, remembering that you can go up and down 1 stop naturally without using your braking die to try and maximize your time. To, if you flip back to, remember at the back end of every turn, you're then marking down what gear you finished in to try and maximize what gear you fit in, and you can see a lot of strategy starting to take place now. So you're getting the gist of this now. It's about maximising those dice that you have for that particular car, using them in the best way possible to make sure you try and finish on as high a gear as possible, whilst potentially doing a flat out roll to get some focus tokens to make sure that when you have to do singular rolls that you're safeguarding as much as possible. But if you remember, I span out when I did that flat out roll, and that meant I had to draw 2 tokens from a nasty little bag, as well as adding 2 minutes to my time. So here's the nasty little bag here, and what you do when you spin out, you reference your car to find out what gear you were in and what the conditions were when you what the status of the particular tile that you were on when you span out, and then you see if you drew any tokens out. So we knew that I span out on a tile that had a red marker on there with in 4th gear, which meant I then had to draw 2 tokens out of the bag. So you get the bag and you draw 2 tokens from there. So let's see, here we go. Aha! Oops. So I've now drawn 2 particular tokens. Now, first token I've drawn isn't that bad. It's actually a green flag, and what that means is that doesn't really have any kind of impact for me, thankfully. I can just continue playing the game as normal, so that's good. However, the second token I drew out was a -1 on a red cube, and what that means is for the rest of this lap I now have 1 less brake die to work with, which means I have to now rethink my strategy on braking. And this can also work that you can also draw them out that you have 1 less white die as well, or maybe it's going to be 1 less gear die as well. So you can see that spinning out is not really a good thing. Not only does it add time onto your lap, but it also can have some really particularly nasty consequences, and you can really kind of bugger up when you're storming ahead on a lap and you have maybe 1 corner to go and you chance it too far, you spin out and you've added time to your lap, and it just means that those tokens that you pull out have a really nasty effect, and that is what happens when you spin out. See, in the solo version of Rallyman GT, your game is made or broken based on any one particular die roll. That can seem thrilling and exciting if it happens at the back end of your lap. You're racing for victory. You think you're going to beat your previous time that you've recorded, and that's great. And you make a bad roll, and the adrenaline was there. However, all too often this can happen relatively early on in a lap, and if that does, there's nothing you can do. You've essentially blown the lap, and that means you just scrap it and you start again, and there's nothing theoretically to stop that happening time and time again. Now, there are mitigation strategies, of course. course, you will learn each track. You'll know which dice you want to play and how safe you want to play it, and you'll try and edge those out. But it can happen, and it can be a bit of an issue because, you know, the game itself, if you have an effective kind of storage system or indexing system for the various tiles, you know, it can be set up in an okay amount of time, but as the tracks get bigger, it can take quite a while to set them up and then tear them down and put them away in a particular order, which means that you can set them up again in a relatively fast way next time. And what can happen is you may set up a big track, and you're only playing solo, time trial mode against your previous score, and what happens is you have a few laps and you haven't done particularly well, and then you just think, I can't be arsed with it now, so you're going to tear it all down. So that can be a bit of a problem there, is because you're not getting that interaction that you would get from a multiplayer game. Of course, in a multiplayer game, what would happen is if you mess up early on, it could be that Fred or Barry or Sheila or whoever's ahead of you in the game is going to mess up further down into the lap or into the game itself, and therefore there's a catch-up potential there in place, but there isn't in the solo game. If you make a mistake in the time trial mode, that's it. That's your lap blown. If it happens near the end, that's the adrenaline. If it happens anywhere else, then quite frankly, it can put a dampener on things. Excuse me. So I mentioned setting things up can be a bit of an issue. Your overall enjoyment of the game is going to come out of whether or not you like dice-based deterministic mechanisms in your games. It is a game of potential randomness. Now, there are ways to mitigate it, as I mentioned, by placing only the dice down that you think are going to help you, and kind of placing your focus tokens in the right place, and also kind of maximizing what you do with things, but you are still determining the outcome via dice. And, you know, no two games are ever going to roll exactly the same. If you don't like dice games, then this game is potentially not for you. From a solo perspective, as I say, out of the box, it comes with only the time trial mode out of the box. Now, that is helped by the fact that you have this plethora of tracks and courses that you can make, and also, of course, you can make your own tracks as well. So that adds a lot of variability, but in a term of not adding variability, you're only ever going to have out of the base game the GT6. Now, you can buy a GT5 expansion, which I've got, a GT4 expansion, which I don't have, which give you different cars to play around with and try different things on and match times against, etc. So you can expand that repertoire, but if you're just getting the base game as a solo player, be prepared for the fact there's only one car type that comes with that. Helps with consistency, doesn't necessarily help with variability there as well. Look, the rulebook is okay. There are a couple of things that are slightly ambiguous, but you kind of get onto BGG and on some of the forums and they're going to sort that out for you. But overall, from a solo perspective, it would be initially quite difficult to recommend this as a purely solo experience. There is game there. There is not a lot of game. There is game there. There's a lot of variables and variations on this game that you can play. But initially, on first inspection from a solo perspective, you know, there are probably games out there that should be worth your money more than this. However, here's the really, really interesting thing. Here's what takes it from an okayish solo game to something that potentially you should think about. There is a huge, huge solo community for Rallyman GT out on the BGG forums, out on Facebook. There are ways to expand how this game plays solo. So I dare say that when Rallyman GT was launched, you know, Holy Grail Games and Jean-Christophe Bouvier knew that there was a solo community, but potentially didn't know just how much of an impact this game could have on the solo community. For a game that has potentially only been out in its current form, forget the original Rallyman, but in Rallyman GT for only a few months, the solo community is huge. If you go on BGG, into the solo forums on BGG, you will find that there are constant competitions and time trials and leaderboards, etc. They will set courses, and you will try and race them and get the best time, and then link them up with other people as well to find out who's beating and who's got best on the leaderboard, etc. That creates something great, because suddenly you're in an age where you're not just trying to beat your own time. So you have something else to battle against there, and that's other people's times, and trying to maximise that was replicating tracks. Of course, from the various expansions that you've got, so you got the World Tour, you've got the Championship, you've got another one as well, which is Team Challenge. You get more tiles in each of those, and that then increases the repertoire and the amount of tracks that you can get. And also, in each of these expansion books, or these expansion packs that you get, the books will have various tracks from around the world. But the community is also great at creating its own tracks as well, using the plethora of tiles that are available and coming up with some really unique experiences that you may have not thought about. So suddenly you can see some more longevity kicking in there. But all these are based around this time trial mode. There are at least, and there are probably more, but there are at least 2 options which are on the forums which allow you to race against AI opponents, and this becomes something completely different then, because you're taking a game from a time trial mode into this AI mode, or these AI modes where you're racing against opponents who are controlled in a very, very simple manner, racing against you on the board. So therefore, if you do spin out early, there is still this catch-up mechanism. And the great thing about these AI modes, so you have Dr. Worm's AI mode, which is one that I prefer, or you have the AI dashboards as well, and I've also used that. They operate in slightly different ways, but both of them have a difficulty grading. Now you could, if you're using Dr. Worms, you could put every AI opponent on green, which I think is the easiest setting, and you may well win that race. Or you could put everyone on red, which is the hardest setting, and you may well lose that. What I like to do is get at least 4 opponents on there and have them all at potentially different settings, and that way you're racing against a varied field, and that really does change the game up from a time trial mode which is kind of enjoyable into a game where you're actually battling against other people. Now, there is absolutely nothing to stop you playing the game with 4 cars on your own and just controlling each car, not really minding what the outcome is, just understanding and getting the enjoyment out of controlling 4 different cars. There's nothing to stop you doing that, but the AI modes that are there on the forums and on the files are on BGG are just taking it to a whole different level for me. They've increased my enjoyment of this game. Had I just bought the base game, and I've just been doing the time trial modes from the base game, and had these AI opponents not been there, I wouldn't have bought any of the expansions. It would have held a limited interest for me. But adding those expansions in place, having those AI opponents in place meant that suddenly the game became a lot more interesting for me. I got some competitive action out of it against racing against the AIs, and therefore I wasn't just trying to beat my own score. But then when I delved further, and as I say, I found this online community where the challenges are put out, constantly on there, and people are constantly comparing scores. It does give the game a different perspective. Overall then, Rallyman GT is a bit of a mixed bag. I fully appreciate I'm not the core audience here. I'm not a petrol head. I don't really understand car racing, never been interested in it, but I did want a racing game mechanic, and this game does absolutely scratch that itch for me. It does provide an element of excitement as you're racing around the board. I know I mentioned that if you spin off early on a time trial map, then it can impact your enjoyment on the game, but chances are you're going to get more or less all the way, if not all the way around it, and then you're going to want to beat that again. So there is a game in here. I think that had it not been for the community being so active, and for these AI opponents that you can have, Dr. Worms or the AI dashboards, or if you have a look, Jean-Christophe Bouvier is also very active on the forums as well. I know recently he's released some Formula 1 dashboards for people to test out. So I think that, should you be willing to immerse yourself in this, you're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it. Now, from a solo perspective, even with the AI dashboards, or the 2 versions of that, and with the burgeoning community, I still can't wholeheartedly recommend it, because this is a game that you can see is designed for multiple people and interaction. And therefore, by not having multiple people play this game and only playing it solo, you're missing out on a large part of that. It is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a bad experience. It's a wholly enjoyable experience that is mitigated, that is dampened down a little bit because it does rely on player interaction. I do enjoy Rallyman. I think that if you're looking for a racing game, I've not played Flamme Rouge, but if you're looking for a racing game that gives you a decent solo experience, as long as you don't mind time trialing, then you could do far worse than go for Rallyman. I can only assume that there's going to be more expansions in the works, maybe further work on a solo mode. I have no idea. I would like to see a proper official AI to this, maybe a card-driven AI which details the dice rolls or something, I don't know, or app integrated AI as well, which could help there. Don't know how that's going to work. Let's see what the future holds. So Rallyman GT, look, I have totally enjoyed my time with Rallyman GT. I just can't wholeheartedly recommend it as a solo player for all the reasons that I've mentioned. If you've got it and you want to play it solo, but you're also going to play it with other people, then great. It's a fantastic game to play, great experience that is easy to learn. But if you're just getting it for solo, do bear in mind those kind of the points that I've raised. It is time trial unless you're willing to kind of invest in the AI that's on the BGG forums, but even that doesn't feel like a complete experience. It's good, it's not great that way. So from solo only, not quite there as a recommendation from Not Board Gaming, but as a game overall, if you're willing to play solo and with other people, then absolutely go and get Rallyman GT by Holy Grail Games, designed by Jean-Christophe Bouvier. Okay, Not Board Gamers, thank you very much for joining me through that journey on Rallyman GT by Holy Grail Games. Look, as I mentioned, the solo experience is an enjoyable experience. I think there's more scope for it there. I can't heartily recommend it that you go out purely as a solo experience, but if you're going to play it with other people, then there's quite an exciting game in the box there. Thank you for joining me through that video. Do remember you can always follow Not Board Gaming on Facebook or on Instagram. So that's Not Board Gaming, always BORED. So don't forget to follow those. I'm very active on things like the Solo BG community, on Board Game Exposure, on Board Game Spotlight, etc. So if you see me on those, do not hesitate to kind of say hi to me as well. Remember, during this crisis, please stay safe. Please stay at home as well. The sooner that we all stay at home, the sooner we get over this, and the sooner normality starts to ensue for everybody as well. So I hope you're all staying safe there. Do remember that you can always like and subscribe to the channel. You can check out our other videos as well. And one final thing from me. If you can't find anybody else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves. Until next time.